Have you been here before?
No, sir.
We're a maximum security prison. You'll be handling rehab prisoners. But here we also have punishment cells, and death row cells.
Hello and welcome to That's Life. I'm Lydia Vasco, and today in the studio with me is filmmaker Boo Junfeng.
Hi Lydia. Hi everyone.
So we're here to talk mostly about your latest film, Apprentice, which opened in local theaters on June 30th after positive receptions at both Sydney Film Festival and Cannes Film Festival in France. Congratulations, that must be really exciting for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you tell us what is the film about?
Well, the film is about a young prison officer. His name is Aiman, and he is transferred into the main prison of the territory, and where he meets Rahim, who is the chief executioner of the prison, and they develop a friendship. And thereafter, we find out that actually Aiman's father was executed, and quite possibly by Rahim several years ago. So they develop a trust between them, but with Aiman holding this secret with him. And eventually, Aiman is asked to take over, and the kinds of ethical and moral dilemmas that he goes through.
It's quite a serious, dark topic, right? What was the inspiration for this?
Well, the capital punishment is something that I've been concerned about for a long time, and in thinking about what I wanted to make for my second film, I decided that I wanted to tell the story from the point of view of an executioner, because I feel that films that deal with the death penalty coming from the prisoner's point of view, are films that we've seen before, whereas someone who actually needs to pull the lever and execute someone is a point of view that we don't usually come across. And I also had a very real curiosity towards the human psyche behind someone who is empowered to kill. In many societies in the world where death penalty is still being practiced, we often forget that there is someone or a group of persons who needs to kill as a part of their job. To me, in any modern society, I think that is quite intriguing.
It's something that we really don't think about very much. You're right, that there are people whose job it is to kill other people, and it's completely sanctioned by society. How did you even begin to try and get into this psyche, to try and understand the point of view of an executioner?
Well, in writing and researching for the film, I spent 3 years writing and researching. I reached out to different people. I managed to speak with a couple of former executioners. I spoke with religious counselors who had walked with inmates on their final walks, and also families of those who had been executed, to understand the possible traumas that they might have gone through. And it's been a fascinating, often heartbreaking journey for me to understand perspectives that I didn't think I would understand, but I made it a mission of mine to dig deeper to understand the complexities behind capital punishment.
Was there anything that surprised you in your discussions with the families or the executioners themselves?
With the executioners, I remember the first person who spoke with me, before I met him, I had an idea of what he might be like. In fact, by that time, I had already written a first draft of the script based on my impression of what an executioner in Singapore might be like. But I remember just meeting him at his flat over tea, and his family was around. And just 5 minutes into the conversation, I forgot he was the hangman, because he was such a jocular, very friendly grandfather who had a lot of wonderful stories to tell, including his time as an executioner. So when I was leaving his place, I remember just really liking him and really being fascinated by the stories that he had to tell. And for the first time, I could put a human being behind this impression of what I already had. And it forced me to reassess what exactly it was that I wanted to put in the story, and who exactly was this character that I wanted to create in order for the story to be real. And For 2 months after that interview, I couldn't write. I was stuck because I realized that the character I had written by that time was very much just a caricature, and I wanted it to be more than that. So I went back to the drawing boards and I started to think a lot deeper and just study the character a lot deeper.
How did the executioner that you spoke with feel about his job? What did he have to say about it?
Well, actually, the two that I spoke with had very different points of view. One of them was actually quite proud of what he was doing because he felt that if he was helping to uphold justice, but more importantly, he was proud of the fact that he could do his job well. And in doing it well, he made it swift and efficient, and thereby lessening the pain or the trauma on the prisoner. And so he saw that as part of what he thought was the humane thing to do. The other one whom I spoke to saw it in more pragmatic terms, that, if he didn't do it, someone else would have to do it. And if he felt that he could bring himself to do it, then why not?
So now that the film is finished, I'm curious to know what your views were on the death penalty before you started making this film, and whether or not they've changed after having spoken with family members, after having spoken with the executioners, and after kind of getting into the psyche of an executioner. Do you still view the death penalty in the same way?
Well, I think my stand on the death penalty remains. I'm against the death penalty because my principle is that I don't believe that society has the right to take the life of another person, even if the person has committed terrible things. That's a principled position that I take. But for me, it was always very important in balancing the different points of view so that the film is able to present the argument from different sides, and not just from an intellectual point of view but also from a psychological and emotional place. And so Ayman, being both someone who wears a uniform and needs to perform his duties, and someone who is in a way a casualty of capital punishment, having his father executed, I think he embodies kind of both sides, and that conflict he goes through goes a lot deeper. And I think that depth of his experience being seen on screen will hopefully bring the audience, or shed light for the audience, on something that is very often out of sight and out of mind.
So this is your second feature film after Sandcastles, which was released in 2010 and was also screened at Cannes. So 2 feature films, both screened at Cannes. How does that make you feel as a young filmmaker, and do you feel any pressure because of it?
After Sandcastle did quite well at the festival circuit and also got very good reviews here in Singapore, and the response here was very good, naturally there will be pressure. I think anyone would feel that pressure. But for me, I remember actually after making Sandcastle that I've always felt a bit too young to be making the films that I wanted to make. I made Sandcastle in my mid-20s, and it was in Cannes when I was 27. And I've always felt that a little bit inadequate. I felt like I was still lacking something in me. And that's part of the reason why it took 6 years for my next film to be made. And so yeah, I'm very glad I took that time. Being in Cannes again this time with Apprentice and having the reception that we got has been very, very, very rewarding. Not only is it in Cannes, we've also sold the film theatrically to France, to UK, to Mexico, Turkey, Poland, Hong Kong, and then now it's going to show in Singapore. And I'm very happy that a lot of the crew and cast that were a part of the journey was with me in Cannes and can also share the moments here with me in Singapore.
You started off with short films. You have numerous award-winning short films, and throughout you've written and directed all of your work. Why do you take on both roles, and what are the difficulties and maybe the benefits that come with that?
Well, first of all, a lot of the filmmakers that I look up to are writer-directors themselves. And I'd love to be able to work with a writer, but so far I haven't found a screenwriter that I feel comfortable with to be able to flesh out the stories that I want to tell. And so I often just take it upon myself to write. And I actually enjoy the writing process. It's a very solitary process, but at the same time, it's the part of the creation process that I feel the least pressure because I have the time in the world to shape something to my sensibilities. It's the freest part of the creative process in making a film.
Why are films your medium of choice? What about them attracts you?
I was first drawn into filmmaking because I was just fascinated by the idea of make-believe, that you could create or recreate a world and everything within that frame is all that matters, and how people come to the cinema to look at what essentially is a white screen with light being thrown onto it, and yet can be transported into all these different worlds and different realities. And it gives us, at the end of a good film, a better understanding of humanity or of the human condition. To me, that still remains the beauty of cinema. So I'm drawn to films like that. They tend to be drama, but drama that says something, that reach into us, our souls, and prompt us to think and contemplate about humanity. Those are the kinds of films that I aspire to make.
So it sounds like you're drawn much more to filmmakers who represent a particular reality of the human condition rather than a particular aesthetic.
Or genre, yeah. They can cross genre. I mean, I love a lot of the Pixar films as well because I think...
Which one's your favorite?
I just saw Zootopia, which I really liked.
Yeah?
Yeah, I haven't seen Finding Dory yet.
I haven't either,
Yeah.
but Finding Nemo is one of my favorite films.
Yeah. I mean, even in an animation, you can see so much about humanity and love. I mean, even a fish can bring that out, So I think that's the power of filmmaking, regardless of your taste in genre. If it speaks to you and if it stays with you, I think that makes a good film.
And for you personally, what are some of the topics and themes that drive your work? Looking at a number of your films, it does seem like family takes center place.
Well, I think family is something that most people can relate to, family relationships. And I often use that or use the dynamics within a family to put across themes that are quite often larger than life, whether it is something that's more socio-political or something that speak of maybe a larger national identity. The power of filmmaking is that we are able to strip the politics down to something that's a lot more intimate and human. And by humanizing a lot of these issues, they no longer remain just issues, they become human experiences when we are able to see them in a story, in a film. And I think with these human experiences, we understand things a lot more deeply. How do we make use of that as in a way a vehicle for something that is larger than life, that most people cannot grasp or can't really fully comprehend.
So do you see yourself as a political filmmaker?
No, I don't think so. I think if I'm deemed political, so will many, in fact every other storyteller out there. All I seek to do is in shining a light on humanity, really. And it's something that sometimes we need a reminder of once in a while.
What do you hope then to achieve with each of your films? What would make you sit back and think, okay, that was good. I did what I wanted to do?
I think that's part of the beauty of being able to go to film festivals, is that I get to interact very directly with the audience, because in a commercial cinema you don't get to do that. And to just see how people respond to the film, and if they respond to something that was intended, I feel happy, I feel satisfied. But if they surprise me with responses that I didn't expect, then that teaches me something, and I learn something from it too. It's something that continues to educate me in my journey as a filmmaker.
So that's what you're looking for, that kind of discussion and feedback from the audience?
Yeah. And it depends on different audiences. Sometimes the discussion can be quite in-depth. Sometimes it can be intellectual. Some audiences also require a bit of hand-holding and a bit of explanation, so that they can process different kinds of films. Because for most people, they are exposed to Hollywood films and a certain mode of storytelling. And so I think if we want to expand the audience for different kinds of films, we as filmmakers also need to help educate, to various forms of filmmaking. And that's also one of the things that I seek to do, instead of dumbing down films or stories or subject matters to what is perceived to be mass appeal. I'd much rather work on something with integrity and then try my best to introduce new audiences to it. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy very much about going to film festivals. It's not about the red carpets or the publicity side of things. Of course, that gives the film publicity, which allows the film to go further. But for me, what means the most is when I get to speak with audiences and interact. Yeah.
And what was the reception like at Cannes and at Sydney? What kind of questions did you get? What were people most intrigued by or curious about?
I think most people were very intrigued by the point of view that the film takes, and it's something that most people haven't seen before. So the originality of it was something that was quite special to a lot of people. In Sydney, because the theatre was right in the city centre, so it was a very, very big theatre at the State Theatre in Sydney. And it was quite wonderful at the end of the film to hear this collective gasp and a collective sigh of relief. I won't say what it is for, but just to witness that kind of reaction from a very responsive audience was also very rewarding on its own.
I'm happy for you. That sounds amazing. What a rewarding experience to have after 5 years of work on a project.
Yeah, and I must say, I mean, it's not just for me, but it's also for my cast and crew. Many of them who's put in a lot of faith in the film. A lot of dedication and hard work went into making the film and all the departments that made the film possible. So I'm very, very thankful that I have a great team behind me.
All right, well, thank you so much. This has been filmmaker Boo Junfeng joining me, Lydia Vosco. Until next time on That's Life.